From the CyberHub bunker and studio, you're tuning in to the CyberHub Podcast. And now for your host and CISO, James Azar.
Good morning, security gang. Welcome to another episode of the CyberHub Podcast, a packed show. If yesterday, the feedback I got about yesterday's show was off the chains. So I'll tell you this, glad y'all loved the insights. Thank you for sharing. Today, no different than yesterday, as we were trying to kind of mold today's show maybe around keeping up with Patch Tuesday. There was just no possible way to continue to do that given just the amount of news that continue to come around data breaches, around supply chain impact, and around just the global economy, and then how cyber espionage is playing a role in it. So we have some Patch Tuesday stuff to catch up on, but we also have a lot to talk about on this morning's show. So join me now in getting ready to receive the latest words of cybersecurity greatness on the show today. I've got my double espresso this morning, beautifully made, beautifully crafted. Coffee cup cheers. Let me know what you're drinking in the comments. I've got the Lavazza Crema espresso capsule. That's what I made this morning because I didn't have time to use my really good espresso machine. So coffee cup cheers, y'all. Magnificent. So China. We have a lot to talk about China today, like we did yesterday. A Chinese threat actor is seen disrupting the drone supply chain in a multi-wave attack against various organizations in Taiwan and South Korea, according to Trend Micro. Earth Emmet, believed to be tied to Chinese APTs. The group was seen launching 2 attack campaigns between 2023 and 2024, targeting organizations across multiple sectors to compromise trusted supply chains. The campaign hit military, heavy industry, software services, satellite technology, media, and healthcare organizations. It was named Tidrone and Venom because obviously, why one name? The Tidrone campaign was initially detailed in September of 2024 after the Chinese attackers were seen abusing enterprise resource planning software and remote desktop access to deploy the CLNT and CLNT END backdoors, steal information, and disable security protections. In a new report, Trend Micro is explaining that the Venom campaign occurred prior to the Tidrone, targeting service providers and technology companies in Taiwan and heavy industry firms in South Korea. Earth Emmet's strategy centered around infiltrating the upstream segment of the drone supply chain by compromising trusted vendors. The group positioned itself to target downstream customers, demonstrating how supply chain attacks can ripple out and cause broad and global consequences. So here's a little bit of context for all of y'all. Why is this massive? And I'll explain. India and Pakistan went into a ceasefire, I think, earlier this week, like over the weekend. I believe it was Sunday when President Trump announced the India and Pakistan reached a ceasefire. But that war was U.S. and Israeli weapons versus Chinese and Russian weapons. Specifically meaning Pakistan has some American weapons and has some Chinese weapons. And India's got Russian weapons, Israeli weapons, and some U.S. weapons. And so you started to see kind of what works well against what and so forth. But we now know that China was heavily vested in Pakistan. And there's ripple effects from that. The ripple effects now is that India is now limiting trade with China, considering getting rid of all trade with China potentially. And this is significant. And the reason this is significant, folks, is because you don't think about it, but the downstream impact of cybersecurity events like these is translated into the real battlefield. And we've seen that in Russia and Ukraine. We saw that after the October 7th attacks in Israel. We're seeing it in India and Pakistan, and we're seeing it now specifically around the President Trump's tariff campaign and policy and kind of his new global order around fair trade with America. And so a lot of these organizations are targeting specific supply chains in order to destabilize everything, in order to create leverage in negotiations. It's exactly what the Chinese do every single time. So they were tampering with legitimate software. They were using target companies, compromising upstream vendors, delivering malware to some of those connected systems. Some of these attacks involved service providers for code injection and the distribution of malware to their customers. They even deployed backdoors for cyber espionage purposes, according to Trend Micro. And again, you just see how crazy that is. Thank you for tuning in, Justin. Great insights. Thank you so much for the feedback. We'll continue here. So keep your eyes on this, by the way, because China is behind a lot of what's happening here, and that's eventually going to come to the negotiating table with President Trump. A cybersecurity incident at Nucor's corporation system, the largest steel producer in the U.S., forcing the company to take offline parts of its network and implement containment measure. The incident did cause the company to temporarily suspend production at multiple locations, although the full impact remains unclear. Nucor is a major steel producer in the U.S. and scrap recycler in North America. It's primarily the supplier of reinforcing bar that's used extensively in the country's building bridges, roads, and infrastructure. The company employs 32,000 people across numerous mills in the U.S., Mexico, and Canada, and reported around $7.83 billion in revenue just in the first quarter of the year. The incident was disclosed via an 8K filing submitted to the SEC, and they said that they've identified an incident involving unauthorized third-party access to certain IT systems used by the company. So they're being very clear that this was an IT attack, but the convergence in manufacturing between IT and OT is very different than it is in energy. That convergence exists. And so if they attacked IT, they knew they could attack OT. OT systems are harder to recover, except to rip and replace, which is not easy to do. You're talking about months or sometimes even a year of downtime. So they automatically shut everything down. That's the precaution, and that's a good kind of standard if you have that convergence. Like with Colonial Pipeline, there was no reason. There was no convergence between IT and OT. The ransomware was on IT, but because they couldn't bill, they shut down the pipeline. Here, this is completely different. In manufacturing, in these types of environments where the ERP and IT systems are integrated into the OT systems in order to keep good track of effectiveness, of performance, of accuracy, of orders, of all of that, it essentially lays in the pipeline. So because of that, this is a bigger issue, and they had to shut it down. And so Nucor has also said they've notified law enforcement. Meanwhile, certain production operations at various locations were halted, although they note that they're gradually starting to restart them. And obviously, you can obfuscate those networks. You can turn them back on by completely just essentially building a secondary network that has nothing associated. Keep your OT running, and then slowly recover your IT responsibly doing so. We go back to co-op. So the large co-op stores in the UK, we talked about it earlier this week. Stores' shelves are running low with product. They're unable to really kind of get it there. The retailer employs 50,000 people, operates 3,000 outlets nationwide. It said it's taken proactive steps. They're really struggling here with recovery. Shireen Khoury Haque, the CEO of Co-op, issued a personal message to members owned this week, acknowledging the disruption caused by the cyber attack and its impact on operations. The criminals that are perpetrating these attacks are highly sophisticated, and our colleagues are working tirelessly to do three things: protect and defend our co-op. Well, one, you should have done that before the attack. Two, fully understand the extent of the impact caused by the attack. You're a month and a half in. How do you not know the full impact yet? And provide much needed information to authorities that may help them with their investigation. We're actively managing the severity of the attack. Actively managing the severity of the attack has meant shutting down some of our systems to protect the organization. So there's empty stores at the moment. Telling the BBC, a co-op spokesperson telling the BBC the chain has introduced a temporary contingency stock ordering and delivery process. Again, this kind of shows you a company with 50,000 people, 3,000 stores. Lack of planning leads to this. And I don't want to throw them under the bus, but at some point you got to go. An attack that happened nearly a month ago, you should have, like, the CEO of this co-op should be fired. Everyone who owns this co-op should be asking for her head. You need to leave. You failed at building resiliency into the business. And this type of failure doesn't reflect on cyber. It reflects on the business, because it's the CEO's job. It's the CEO and the COO's job to build continuity and backups. And then they task security, IT, infrastructure, and others with helping them do that. So we'll see. They're saying they're fighting for customer data. You're not going to fight for customer data. We obviously know even if you paid the ransom, that data was going to go out there. That data was going to be given out. Like, they're going to sell that data, whether you pay them or not. They're going to sell that data because that's what they do. These are not honorable people. So this idea that you can negotiate with these criminals and somehow it's a business transaction is flawed to begin with. And it's why cybercrime is excelling as the fourth largest economy in the planet, right? So you have that for co-op. But we continue with Canadian electric utility Nova Scotia Power now sharing a list of the personal and financial information that were stolen, part of a recently disclosed incident response. So again, here this was an IT impact. It didn't impact any sort of disruption to the OT networks, because in energy, that separation is just it's a wall, right? There's no OT and IT interaction at all in energy. So the attackers were able to get into the IT networks. They were able to steal some customer information. And so the update shared yesterday by Nova Scotia Power says that customer information stored on some of those compromised servers was accessed and taken on or around March 19th. That would include name, dates of birth, phone numbers, email addresses, mailing and service addresses, as well as data such as power consumption, service requests, payment and billing, and credit history. Some driver's license number and social insurance numbers were also compromised in some cases. For customers who provided that information, the attackers also obtained bank account numbers shared for pre-authorized payments, and apparently those were not encrypted in their environment, which is a big no-no. Anyone who's ever dealt with any sort of payment system understands the first thing you do, essentially the first thing you always do, is you secure payment information. You secure payment information because of PCI, because of the financial regulations, because of the fines and the risks that exist to the business and to the company's reputation. The fact that this wasn't the case, again, shows you just how lagging some of these organizations are, irregardless to how big they are, irregardless to how many customers they have. Some of them feel like this can't happen to me, or why would someone want this? Why would I be a target? You don't need to ask. You're a checkbook. And if you're unprepared, you're likely a very big checkbook that I can get money out of. That's what the cyber criminal says. That's kind of has to be the thought process there as well. We're not done with data breaches here. The Australian Human Rights Commission disclosing a data breach incident where private documents were leaked online and indexed by major search engines. Many of the hundreds of documents exposed contain private and sensitive information like name, contact details, health details, schooling, religion, employment information, and even photographs. The AHRC is an independent statutory body established by the Australian government with the primary role of promoting and protecting human rights in the country. It receives and investigates discrimination complaints, monitors compliance with international human rights obligations, and conducts inquiries and research and oversees related projects and initiatives. According to the announcement, the breach impacted submissions between the following dates: between March 24th of 2025 and April 10th of 2025, and any projects between March 2024 to September of 2024, and submissions to the National Anti-Racism Framework Concept Paper between October 2021 and 2024. A total of 670 documents were exposed online and accessed between April 3rd and May 5th. And yesterday we talked on the show how Australia's the amount of cyber attacks on Australia just are not in the kind of graph you want to see for those numbers. They continue to struggle there as well. Google warning today that attackers using scattered spider tactics against retail chains in the UK like Co-op and Harrods and others have now started targeting retailers in the US. The US retail sector is currently being targeted on ransomware and extortion operations that they believe are linked to UNC 3944, also known as Scattered Spider, according to John Holtquist, the chief analyst at Google Threat Intelligence Group. The actor, which has reportedly targeted retail in the UK following a long hiatus, has a history of focusing their efforts on a single sector at a time. Mark and Spencer just announcing that the cost of the breach, they're asking insurance for over $100 million. That's the claim. Co-op still trying to recover. Scattered Cyber was started targeting UK retailers in April. That was kind of their test case, and now we're seeing them head to the US. So if you're a retailer and you're a practitioner in a retailer, keep your eyes out, study their TTPs and IOCs, and make sure your team is set and ready. At least 2 ransomware groups and multiple Chinese APTs are still targeting the SAP NetWeaver vulnerabilities. Those are CVEs 2025-31324 and 42999er. One has a CVSS score of a perfect 10. The other has a CVSS score of 9.1. And it does impact the NetWeaver's Visual Composer development server component. It could be exploited to execute arbitrary code without even authentication. In the wild, attacks have been ongoing since January, and now the Chinese APT activity is increasing. Folks, this sounds a lot like SolarWinds, just without the backdoors. They found a 0-day and they're honing in on it, understanding so many large organizations use it, and that's a way in for the Chinese Ministry of State Security or affiliated private entities. This is essentially what they're looking for. Thank you, Justin, for preaching it. I'll continue to preach here as we go. So again, you want to make sure you get this patched. And obviously Avanti has 2 additional 0 days. So those came out on Tuesday. Somehow Avanti, still people are gluten for punishment. Look, freedom of choice, but please, you can pick better. The market is overwhelmed with better products. Do yourself a favor. The Chinese love Avanti and Avanti customers for a reason. They never patch their systems, and there's always 0 days. Get yourself out of that list. Do yourself a favor. So Avanti, SAP on the Chinese radar now, actively being exploited. Google on Wednesday announcing the release of Chrome 136 to resolve 4 different vulnerabilities. The primary one is CVE 2025-4664 is one of the 2 bugs reported by external researchers. They didn't provide technical details, but said the flaw as an insufficient policy enforcement issue in Loader. So you want to make sure you get that updated as well. Let's get into some Patch Tuesday makeup here. Intel, AMD, and ARM all published Patch Tuesday security advisories informing customers of vulnerabilities found recently in their products, one related to a newly disclosed CPU attack. One of the CPU attacks disclosed this week by researchers at Swiss University ETH Zurich. The researchers discovered a branch privilege injection issue, CVE 2024-45332, which they claim brings back the full might of branch target injection attack Spectre BTI on Intel devices. The researchers claim that while Intel's Spectre BTI, aka Spectre V2, mitigations have worked for nearly 6 years, they've now found another way to break them. In the advisory, Intel says it's releasing a microcode update to mitigate this, which describes it as a sensitive information disclosure issue. AMD did publish an advisory informing customers that, as stated by the researchers as well, the vulnerability doesn't impact its CPU there as well. AMD did publish an advisory to say that its CPUs are not impacted, and ARM CPU, on the other hand, may be impacted, telling customers that while this isn't a new vulnerability, its security guidance have been updated there, so you want to make sure to pay attention to those. Juniper, VMware, and Zoom all published a total of 10 security advisories describing dozens of vulnerabilities patched across their products. Juniper announced fixes for nearly 90 bugs and third-party dependencies in Secure Analytics, the virtual appliance that collects security events from network devices, endpoints, and appliances. The patches for these issues, most of which were disclosed last year, were included in Secure Analytics version 7.5.0 up 11 IF03. Some of the flaws are dated to 2016, 2019, and 2020, and 3 of them were rated critical. VMware published 2 advisories dealing with the high severity cross-site scripting defect in the VMware Araya automation appliance tracked as CVE 2025-22249er in a medium severity insecure file handling issue in VMware tools. We talked about that yesterday on the show, CVE 2025-2247. Zoom released 7 advisories detailing 9 security defects in the Zoom workplace apps across desktop and mobile platforms. The most severe, CVE 2025-30663, has a CVSS score of 8.8, and it's a high severity time of check time of use race conditions that could allow a local authenticated attacker to elevate their privileges. And finally, new leadership picks for Cybercommand and NSA are coming amid a broader decision on the structure, weeks after the ouster of General Tim Hott, who helmed both organizations, as well as a civilian deputy at NSA, Wendy Noble. Now the administration could name Noble's replacement in the coming days, or at least before the Memorial Day holiday coming up in just a few. And Memorial Day is not a holiday. For the life of me, I don't understand how people say Memorial Day is a holiday. Memorial Day, for anyone who wore the uniforms in the United States of America, is a day of deep sorrow. It's a day where we remember the men and women that we went to battle with and paid the ultimate sacrifice for our freedoms, for our nation, and their families. On this day, get a stark reminder of the sacrifice their loved ones made to ensure America remains free. It's not a holiday. Memorial Day is not a holiday. Memorial Day is a day of remembrance. Maybe we ought to refactor that just a little bit. Just a little bit. So the announcement is expected before Memorial Day. A handful of political appointees at the Pentagon tried to end the dual hat weeks before the Trump's first term, but were ultimately rebuffed by military leaders. This could be coming back up now for discussion. And again, I said exactly what I think is going to happen here before. I think there's a branch of Cyber Force that's going to launch, the 7th branch of the military. That branch will combine Cybercommand, and NSA will go off and be an agency on its own, very similar to how the CIA is as well. So it's just my thought here. I'm not saying I have any insider information. It's just a gut feeling. I may be wrong. I hope I am. But there's that. That's it for our show this morning. Thank you all for tuning in. So go to cyberhubpodcast.com. You can subscribe. You get our newsletter of the podcast shortly after the podcast is over. It's a summary. It's a great summary of every single story, just a paragraph, just enough for you to be able to understand what we talked about, as well as some action items that we talked about here on the show. Every Friday, we release a weekly summary of all the stories we covered on the show. That's also exclusively available at cyberhubpodcast.com. We're not selling your emails to sponsors. We don't do any of that. Obviously, we don't bring a lot of sponsors on the show. We pick our sponsors the same way we pick our content. It's highly selective, and it's the right content for you. We don't sell any of our information. So going and subscribing doesn't sell your information. You're not going to get hammered by emails. You're going to get 5 to 6 emails a week from us, all of them to do with the show and the stories we're working on. Thank you all. Go make sure to do that at cyberhubpodcast.com. Share, like, comment, save, and let us know if you have any additional stories you want us to cover. We're missing stuff that you really want us to do a deep dive on. Glad to do that. All right. Very happy to do that for all y'all and help you become better security practitioners. Until Monday morning, 9 a.m. Eastern, we'll be live then. Until then, have a great rest of your day, y'all. And most importantly, stay cyber safe.
We love feedback, so make sure to connect with us on social media and subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast listening platform.